If you don't remember the Dream Mirror cards released a few months ago, I don't blame you, because even though they are a casual archetype, usually casual archetypes get more discussion than this one, because pretty much as soon as these cards were revealed, people were just underwhelmed. I mean, they look kind of cool and they have interesting ideas, but in terms of actual playability, even at a rogue level, even at a casual level, they're just not quite there. In today's video, I'll briefly remind you of what the first wave of support for these cards actually did, because that was released a few months ago and a lot of you have probably forgotten about it already, and then we're mostly going to focus on what is happening in Chaos Impact. This set is coming out later in October, and the entire set just got leaked yesterday, so we have all of the new Dream Mirror cards. I believe there are 7 of them that we have to look at in today's video. We're just going to kind of talk about if the deck is better. Spoiler, it is better, but I'm not really sure if it's actually competitively viable yet. And don't forget to stick around until the end of this video, because every single video I upload in October, I'm going to be reviewing one Halloween themed card at the very end. So the basic idea of the main deck Dream Mirror monster cards is that for every monster you have 2 versions, a light and a dark version. And how these cards operate is that they have abilities when they are special summoned by a Dream Mirror effect. That's really easy, well, easy in theory, because the way that you can special summon them is that when you have the light monster, for example, if you control one of their 2 field spells, specifically the dark version, then you contribute that light version to special summon the dark counterpart from your deck. The field spells themselves have a light benefit for each attribute, depending on which attribute monsters you have, and then also during the end phase you can banish one to swap it out for the other one. So that's actually pretty neat. So as long as you draw one field spell, you usually be able to get to the other one that you need to get to, depending on which monster cards you drew. And there were a few big issues with this deck right out of the gate. I think the biggest issue is that it's very, very normal summon reliant. You don't really have any special summoning abilities outside of the dark level 1 monster that can special summon a monster from your hand when it is special summoned. The problem is that to get to that point, you will have to normal summon the light level 1 monster and then have the dark field spell on the field, and then as a quick effect you can do that at ability. But in general, there just isn't really an end goal. You're very normal summon reliant. You don't have a lot of ways to get a bunch of monsters on the board, and to be completely honest, even when you get to your setup of having the field spells and having the monsters, cycling them in and out of the deck or whatever, it's not really doing anything. The effects are kind of cool when you summon them off of other Dream Mirror monsters, but in general, compared to even other rogue strategies right now, there just isn't anything that you can really do that sets this deck apart from other decks out there. All of these things, coupled with the fact that many of the cards are garnets, because you don't want to draw too many of the monsters and you don't want to draw really more than one copy of the field spell, and you have a deck that was very underwhelming that not a lot of people were talking about. And while it wasn't guaranteed, because nothing ever is, I want to say that, but just by reading those cards, looking at their interactions, you can kind of tell that Konami was interested in giving them more support. I'd also like to mention that all of these cards were revealed at the New York Comic-Con from Konami's booth, so the pictures aren't like top quality, but you should be able to read the effects, and obviously I'll read them out loud. So there's only one new main deck pair of monsters here. The first one is Dream Mirror Friend, and it's a dog, and it is a beast warrior, not a beast, which means that you can search it with Tenki, which I guess is kind of cool. So this is the light counterpart, and it says, if this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dream Mirror monster, you can target one level 8 or lower Dream Mirror monster in your graveyard, except this one, and special summon it in defense position. That's kind of cool. I mean, it does give the deck some much needed ways to get more monsters on the board. Special summoning from the hand, like the last level 1 dark monster did, was kind of neat, but special summoning from the graveyard is much appreciated. Then it says during the main phase, it obviously has the rest of the effect here, where if you control, because this is the light one, if you control the dark field spell, Dream Mirror of Terror, you can attribute this card to special summon the other counterpart from your deck. That's pretty much how all these cards operate. The dark counterpart is the Dream Mirror Foe, so you have a friend and foe thing going on here. This one is also a beast warrior because they all share very similar stat lines, although in this case you have, just like all the other ones, you have a reverse attack and defense from a light and dark counterparts. So this one, if it is special summoned by the effect of a Dream Mirror monster, it can attack directly this turn. Is that super viable? I mean, not really. It's kind of cool, right? I guess you could maybe even increase this card's attack in some way, shape, or form, but that's not really why you're playing this card. And this is kind of like the issue with a lot of these other Dream Mirror monsters that we've seen. When you look at these cards, a lot of the times only one of them is really beneficial. One of them is one that you want to use a lot. So like, for example, in the last wave with the level 1 monsters, the dark one's ability to special summon a monster from a hand was pretty cool because it did trigger all of their effects when they were special summoned, because it was a Dream Mirror card, as is this one, this light ability to special summon one from the graveyard that will trigger their effects on summon, which is pretty cool. But the main ability of like those level 1 monsters, in my opinion, is the light one that let you search a card. That was a big deal. It gave the deck some searching ability that it desperately needed. As far as the level 8 monsters went, the dark dark and light monsters. Both of them in a lot of cases were pretty underwhelming. At least the dark monster actually destroyed a card, which is kind of neat, but the light one was mostly just for defense, which really isn't what this deck is trying to do, at least not with the cards we have available. So at least now we get a general idea of what Konami is expecting us to accomplish with this deck. At least in my opinion, the main idea, just looking at these cards, is that you're trying to have the dark level 8 monster either in your hand or graveyard, and then special summon it on your opponent's turn, either with the dark level 1 monster or this new light level 4 monster. But it seems like what they're really trying to do with this deck is not only everything I just described, but they really want you to summon this big fusion boss monster. So this is 3000 attack, 3000 defense, a level 10 monster, and the materials are 2 Dream Mirror monsters with different attributes. So you have to have a light one and a dark one. This thing has a bunch of effects. I like it a lot though. Let's take a look. It says while face up on the field, this card is also dark attribute, so it's a light and dark. That's pretty cool because it will get the benefit from either one of the field spells, because one of the field spells benefits light monsters, the other one benefits dark monsters. This will get a benefit regardless of which field spell you have out, so that's kind of neat. And then it says you can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn as a hard to turn ability. The first effect is if another monster you control is tributed, except in the damage step, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. The second effect is if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's cards, you can special summon one Dream Mirror monster from your graveyard except this thing. So what does this actually accomplish? Well, a lot, really. Like, I'm not even joking here. If you can summon this thing and actually get your engine going, this thing will accomplish a lot in actually breaking your opponent's board and filling up your hand. So one of the ways that it does this is that when you tribute another Dream Mirror monster by its own effect, that's basically how you're triggering that first ability. Not only are you getting the ability of whatever you summon, so in the case of like the dark level 8 monster, you're popping a card your opponent controls, you're also getting the ability of this thing to pop another card on the field. And I like that a lot. It does give you some extra value out of those effects, and you can do that not only on your opponent's turn, but also on your own turn, just depending on which field spells you have up and which monsters you control. But the second ability is really cool as well, because your opponent will probably want to get rid of this thing immediately because you'll be gaining so much advantage from this ability. But when your opponent actually destroys this thing, as long as they destroy it, not just take it or shuffle it back, you get to special summon any Dream Mirror monster from your deck, and that is huge because once again that will trigger all of their on summon abilities. I like this card a lot. I don't know how easy or how hard it will be to summon in an actual competitive match, but let's take a look at its actual fusion summoning thing that they've given us here, Dream Mirror of Chaos. This is a quick play spell card, and it says fusion summon one Dream Mirror fusion monster from your extra deck, of course leaving some room here if they want to add another Dream Mirror fusion monster, but right now we just have the one, and it says using monsters you control as fusion material. Not anything to write home about, except that you do get some benefits here depending on which field spell you have. So if you have Dream Mirror of Joy, the light field spell, you can also use monsters in your hand and fusion material. Not super exciting, that just makes it basically a quick play polymerization, very similar to like El Shaddai Fusion. What is really interesting though is the other effects. So if you have Dream Mirror of Terror, you can actually banish cards from the graveyard as fusion material too, which makes this card like a Miracle Fusion, which that part I like a lot. It does seem really intriguing to summon that big fusion monster without taking any minus in card economy. We're also getting a continuous spell card, Dream Mirror Phantasms, and I like this card a lot, and you'll know why pretty much immediately, because the first effect says when this card is activated, you can add one Dream Mirror monster from your deck to your hand. So no, this cannot search the field spells, but I think that's overall pretty okay. This is what the deck really wants to have, because you don't always know which combination of monsters and field spells you're going to have with every opening hand. This thing helps even it out a lot, and I like that. This is a really good piece of support. And then it says if Dream Mirror Joy is in the field zone, all monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense, and then the opposite thing happens basically if you have a dark field spell. So the other dark one, all monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense, and it is a hard once return effect. So if you have like 3 of these, you can't just play all of them immediately. This card is really cool. I think that the attack and defense modification isn't like completely irrelevant. It is mostly irrelevant, but it is cool to have just an added benefit on top of this card already being a Fire Formation Tenki for the archetype. But beyond that, I mean, you can kind of see what Konami is setting up here. It's not really quite a defensive deck, but definitely is a controlling deck that tries to gain a lot of advantage. You're popping cards on your opponent's side of the field, you're adding cards to your hand, you're special summoning a whole bunch of monsters, and while that can probably in some situations OTK the opponent, it really is sort of like a slow, grindy deck that Konami is creating. But that's not all that we're going to talk about, because there are still 2 more cards, 2 trap cards, and if you remember the last wave of support, they actually got 1 trap card, and I like that trap card a lot. It actually didn't seem that good to me when I first read it, but then I realized that it can work in a very specific situation. So basically, if you have one of each of the field spells banished, you can shuffle them both back into your deck and then banish a card on the field. Now initially, I didn't really realize that one of the most common openings is you play a field spell, and then in the end phase, you banish that field spell and then play the other one one, and then you banish that one to play the first one again. And I didn't quite realize you could do that because I said that the trap card was really bad. There isn't a lot of ways to banish 2 field spells on the first turn. I was completely wrong about that card, so just keep in mind if you draw that trap card and any 1 field spell, you can immediately set up its activation condition. The first card is essentially a trap card version of set rotation, but it places the cards face up for the Dream Mirror archetype. It says choose 1 Dream Mirror of Joy and 1 Dream Mirror of Terror from your hand or your deck and place 1 in your field zone and the other in your opponent's field zone face up, and then is a hard once return ability. And while I wouldn't say every single person that read this card missed this, I would say a lot of people that read this card that I've seen talking about it missed the fact that all of the Dream Mirror monster cards, they don't require you personally to have a specific field spell in your field spell zone. They just require them to be in a field spell zone. What that means is that when you use this card and both field spells are face up, now all of your Dream Mirror cards can continuously use their abilities until your opponent finds a way to get rid of one or both of those field spells. That is huge. It makes this deck twice as fast because you're not just sitting there waiting around until the end phase to find the proper field spell, and I like this card a lot. The last card is a counter trap card, and this one is pretty interesting. So it actually has 2 different things that it can negate depending on which field spell is on the field. Please keep in mind though, if both of them are face up, like in the card we just talked about, you actually can use either one, which makes this card very versatile. So the first effect is if you have Dream Mirror of Joy on the field, the light field spell, and that is it negates a spell or trap card and then destroys it. That's pretty strong. Keep in mind here, it can't negate spell and trap card effects, it can only negate their activations, so if the card is already faced up, this thing actually won't stop it. But I think in most cases it doesn't come up too often. The other effect is if you have Dream Mirror of Terror, the dark field spell, and it says when your opponent would special summon a monster, negate the summon and destroy that monster. That is pretty cool as well. So the main idea here is that you can negate your opponent's cards depending on which field spells are face up, but you really want to combo this card with the other Dream Mirror trap card that we just talked about, which sets both of them on the field face up. But even though all of these cards, especially all of these new cards, look pretty decent on paper, I really want to be cautious here because whenever you're looking at cards like this, when they're just revealed, you know, it can seem really exciting, especially when they have good effects like these ones, but how does the deck actually operate? Because to me, even though there are a lot of good effects once you get the engines going, it really does seem like there are going to be a lot of lopsided hands. You'll have hands where you have too many spell cards or too many monster cards or too many trap cards, or maybe not enough of any of those ones, because for this deck to really operate the way it wants to, and that might not sound too crazy because I'm well aware that they have that new spell card that can search a monster card, but still, I feel like with this deck, it's kind of like FAs, and I played the deck a lot. I even took it to 2 regionals, but it sort of had the same issue. You'd want to draw some field spells, you'd want to draw some monster cards, you'd want to draw some of your extenders, but if you drew too many of one of those or not enough of another one of those, you just had some really unplayable hands. That is what this deck really seems like. To me, what would be a very cool next wave of support, I know we're kind of looking ahead already because we're looking at Chaos Impact, but if we're looking even one set further, I think what I would want is a Cosmo Town-like ability. Obviously not a field spell, but something along the lines of a Magical Mallet for these Dream Mirror cards that can shuffle back any amount of cards to draw the same amount plus 1. That would be really cool. I think that's what this deck really needs to be even a little bit more competitively viable. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the Dream Mirror cards. I feel like this deck is still lacking a couple more tools to actually be a competitively viable rogue deck. Maybe after the next wave of support though, it'll actually be pretty decent, but I think it's really laying the groundworks now, and these cards all look pretty darn good, at least relative to the last wave of support, which is really underwhelming. Konami seems to really want to support this deck, and I'm all for that. I think the deck idea at least is pretty darn cool. As for the Halloween themed card that we're reviewing, we're going to review Hollow. So this card is one that a lot of people thought I would review on Halloween itself, but that's not really what I have planned. I pretty much always review the same card on Halloween and do some video about the same card every Halloween, so you guys will have to wait and see what that is. I'm sure longtime fans already know, but we won't talk about that quite yet. So this is a Pendulum monster, a normal Pendulum monster with a 2 scale, has like a 6-sided die ability that can change a level, but that's not really that viable. What's cool about this card, even though it is a little bit past its time because Link monsters had come out, was that I believe this was the very first generic Pendulum tuner monster, because that was something that Konami was very scared of giving us. We had Pendulum tuner monsters, but a lot of times they came with like plenty of other restrictions. The Lesser Pendulum obviously was super restricted. You couldn't summon like any single monster, but this was really like the first generic tuner monster that was a Pendulum, and a lot of people were excited for that. Obviously not the most competitively viable card. This card didn't really end up doing anything, but if this card would have been released like a year or 2 prior to Link summoning, unlike when it was actually released, I think this card actually would have been pretty decent in a variety of decks. Other than that though, I don't have anything too much to say about this card. it obviously has to be brought up, right? It is the Halloween card, but it's not really that competitively viable. It is something that if it was released a little bit sooner would have been pretty cool, but I guess we won't know what would have happened. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's discussion on all these Dream Mirror cards and the Halloween thing to end it off. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about these Dream Mirrors, as well as what you think I should review for these Halloween cards. I have like 15 of them or so set aside that I want to review, but I'm always open to your guys' suggestions. I'll see you later though. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.